I often describe what's happening in the geospatial industry as a silent revolution. But increasingly, the most interesting conversation is happening at the edge of the geospatial community. The entry of big tech into geospatial conversation. To me, that's a sign that the market has moved to a new phase. We should lean into this moment, right? Big tech brings scale and platform and acceleration. The geospatial sector brings domain knowledge, data trust, and operational depth. So the future belongs in a combination, not the silos. Since the ecosystem is changing rapidly, there is a need for a safe, trusted place like WGIC for convening these functions and becoming strategically and critically more important than ever. What Horizon has demonstrated is that geospatial can convene in a much broader conversation. So that's fact.
WGIC Horizons, a podcast for latest technology, business, partnerships, and policy trends in geospatial industry.
Hello and welcome to Horizons, the World Geospatial Industry podcast. Our guest today is Zubran Solaiman, President WGIC and Director of Product Strategy Bentley Systems. Zubran, thank you so much for joining this conversation. Welcome to the Horizons podcast.
Thank you for having me, Banu.
Great catching up with you this morning, Zubran. I see that as a president of WGIC, you have been spearheading the industry body for about 9-10 months now, right? What has been the experience of working with industry peers and cross-industry partners for you?
That's a good question. Thank you for that. So to me, WGSC is adapting where the geospatial market is going. When people think WGIC, they often imagine a council of traditional geospatial companies that come together and discuss industry issues. That certainly still happens. And that collaboration has always existed. The members have always been willing to share perspective on data, business models, standards, policy, and technology directions. But increasingly, the most interesting conversation is happening at the edge of the geospatial community, where we bring in infrastructure leaders, climate organizations, cloud companies, AI specialists, public sector partners. Now, this reflects a deeper shift. Geospatial is no longer operating in isolation. It's becoming embedded in a much larger system. Whether it's climate resilience planning, digital infrastructure, energy networks, and so forth. So to answer your question in a long-winded way, for me, the experience the last 9 months have been both energizing and clarifying. So energizing because there's a real appetite to work together.
Yes.
Clarifying because it shows WGIC's role is not just to represent an industry, but to help that industry engage with the wider ecosystem in a practical, credible, forward-looking way. Now look at the executives, the WGS executives I work with. We have people from Bentley, Esri, TomTom, and I'm really fortunate to work with such inspiring leaders. That's you don't get that every day, so that's fantastic. But look at our various committees that we have. They're composed of many companies. We put our differences aside and we work together to solve big problems. Now that's the spirit of collaboration, and I love that. So from our ecosystem perspective, in a recent example, I started working with the Chartered Institute of Civil Engineering, surveyors, to see how our members can share information and network together. So, the world's our oyster, and I'm super excited to be with WGIC.
Fantastic. And more so at the point where the geospatial and Earth observation technologies are becoming very mainstream and becoming a kind of shared utility, right? Would you want to share your thoughts on the revolution geospatial is bringing across industries that we are seeing in the world?
For me, I often describe what's happening in the geospatial industry as a silent revolution. Now, what do I mean by silent revolution? If I cast back 20 years ago when I did my master's in GIS, it was clearly at that point associated with mapping, the GIS department, the satellite imagery, the survey workflows. These are still very important and still relevant capabilities, but often seen as specialized functions right now. Today, something different is happening. Geospatial capabilities are shifting from technology specialist cost functions to becoming fundamental in intelligent-driven systems. It's embedded practically inside many of the systems that runs the world today. I mean, think it's part of how cities plan infrastructure, how logistic companies optimize routes, how insurers access climate risks, how utilities manage their networks, and increasingly, let's not forget the AI word here, and increasingly how AI model interprets the physical world, right? The pressure point is that the modern decision-making is becoming inherently spatial.
True.
For example, look at the 10-year infrastructure plan from the UK government that was published last year. It explicitly called out the need for a spatially integrated planning. Now, that's a shift from the traditional infrastructure planning to a system thinking process, right? It's not just about building more, but to start thinking differently from system thinking to better understand the relationship between built environment, planned projects, nature, social needs, all in space and time. So the implication here is that the more geospatial becomes modus operandi or business as usual, it becomes part of the decision architecture of an organization. As a consequence, the more important it becomes to WGIC that can shape that conversation.
True, true. Fantastic for laying that groundwork. So when the technology is becoming a shared infrastructure, as you mentioned, and who shapes how it evolves, how it is governed, and how it is fairly realized. What are your thoughts on the role of WGIC in these aspects and connecting these pieces?
I think WGIC's role is becoming more important than ever. Especially as geospatial data and systems become more embedded everywhere, I just described in the previous question there. So when an industry is small and self-contained, individual companies can largely shape their own destiny. That's a fact. But when a technology like geospatial becomes shared and applied in various industries and executed at operational and strategic level, when it helps both at the bottom line and the top line of an organization, when the data becomes an asset, not a cost, an asset in the balance sheet, these questions become bigger than one company. Yeah, right. So the pressure point today is about fragmentation. Who sets the norm? Who helps distinguish the hype versus the reality? And there's a lot of hype out there. Who influences the policy environments? How do we make sure that the value created by the geospatial capabilities is front and center of the value chain, right? And this is where, in my opinion, WGIC has a unique role. It can be the forum that brings together commercial geospatial players, adjacent industries, public institutions, policy influencers to shape that next chapter collectively and with the intent to create coherence.
True.
So as I mentioned before, since the ecosystem is changing rapidly, there is a need for a safe, trusted place like WGIC for convening these functions and becoming strategically and critically more important than ever. So internally as well, right? People who are existing members of WGIC, let's not forget that. Internally, there's an opportunity to create partnerships within the WGIC members. We endeavor that the capabilities and the success story of each member, irrespective of their size, is broadcasted to the wider community, which raises awareness, which accelerates further innovation and partnership.
Fantastic. That's so right. WGIC is a very safe and trusted and credible
Right.
industry player right now. So, in a lot of geospatial conversations, in many of the events we see these days, we see the big tech companies are actively participating in the conversations, right? So, how is this reshaping how geospatial solutions are evolved and how businesses are organized?
That's a good observation. That's a really good observation. Now, the entry of big tech into geospatial conversation, to me, that's a sign that the market has moved to a new phase.
True.
It tells us that geospatial is no longer seen as a peripheral, like I talked about before. It's recognized as a foundation to AI, to cloud, digital twins, enterprise decision systems. So it's foundational. So that reshapes the solution development in two ways, in my opinion, at least. First, the solutions are becoming more integrated. Uh, they are less likely to be standalone solution products out there and more likely to be part of a broader stack that includes AI, workflow automation, and so forth. Second, businesses are becoming more ecosystem driven. So that success depends less on doing everything yourself and more on knowing where you differentiate and how you can collaborate. So the so what for geospatial companies is important. The so what is this? We should lean into this into this moment, right? Big tech brings scale and platform and acceleration. The geospatial sector brings domain knowledge, data trust, and operational depth. So the future belongs in the combination, not the silos.
That's great. Talking about what WGIC has been doing in the past over a year, and I see that 2025 has been really a landmark year for WGIC with its maiden Horizons 2025 event, right? How has this transformed the way WGIC addresses the community, the ecosystem?
You are right. 2025 has been a milestone year. Uh, it has been a milestone year because it changed the posture in my mind for WGIC. And what do I mean by that? Instead of showing up in geospatial events, just in geospatial events, we took the topic to the adjacent industries. We get to hear voices from the mining, the transport, the energy, the cloud computing industries. What Horizon has demonstrated is that geospatial can convene in a much broader conversation. So that's fact, right? That 2025 was that milestone. The pressure point is that the traditional conferences that we all know and love often stay within their domain. But many of the opportunities, like I described before, sits at the intersections of multiple industries, at least for the geospatial companies there. The implication is that now our members, through our platform, through Horizon platform, they can decide where to go. They can decide how it can be used and get much closer to the adjacent industries and seek new opportunities. This also gives our committee members, let's not forget them, who are the brain trust of WGIC, who produce fantastic products to present their findings to a wider audience. So overall, our members shape that agenda rather than simply reacting to it.
The beauty and also the way we work together through committees. What are some of the geospatial industry gap areas and challenges that WGIC is actively addressing through its work, through its committees?
Well, first, I think we have to give credit to the committees for, I think that's the right thing to do. The committees are the brain trust of WGIC. Each committee is a collection of experts from various member organizations, right, grouped together to address critical major gaps. Currently, they are data, workforce policy, business models, and each committee produces roughly about 2 white papers a year, which are then distributed to our ecosystem channels or communicated through various mediums like podcast and fireside chat and Horizon and so forth. So if I then talk about each of these challenges, I mentioned the first one is on data. That remains the bedrock of the whole industry. It's a given. And our members continue to address issues around procurement cycle, interoperability, management, and reusability. So that's data. The other one is workforce. The demand on geospatial capability is rising faster than the talent pipeline. And AI, and once again, we have to mention the AI word here, is changing not just the volume of skills needed, but also the nature of those skills that's needed there, right? The third one is policy and legal clarity. Now, this comes very promptly in around geo AI and generative AI. The innovation is moving faster than the governance, the policy, and the legal framework. I mean, every 6 months, there's something new. In fact, every 3 months, something is coming new there. Sure. So our committee is focusing on the sovereignty, the authenticity, and the governance. This kind of conversation is paramount to make sure that it's included whilst the innovation is happening in this lightning fast space. Then there is the business model innovation. Many geospatial opportunities are clear in theory, but the funding pathways, the procurement mechanism, and the commercial structure are not always mature enough. So these kind of committees help address those kind of things. So once again, the so what? Why is this important? WGIC's committees are increasingly, in my mind, focusing on the friction point that stops the geospatial from scaling. So it's not just discussing trends, but producing outputs such as white papers and frameworks that help navigate those constraints. So to me, they're just awesome.
So one of the aspects WGIC actively talks about is collaboration, right, within the industry. So how is WGIC helping its members amplify their business and impact? In short, I'm asking, what's the value of a company to join WGIC?
Right. To me, WGIC, as you said, amplifies both the business and its impact in several ways. So first, I would say it gives them a credible collective platform. In many markets, it's much easier to open a conversation when you arrive as part of a respected global industry body rather than as a company knocking on the door alone.
Absolutely.
The second one I would say is that it creates business adjacency. So through committees, events, outreach, and partnership, members are brought into the conversation with city leaders and global associations and adjacent industry players. Now, that often surfaces opportunities that would not emerge through a standalone, if I can use the word, sales motion. Third, it amplifies visibility. So WGIC's podcast, interviews, newsletters, social channels, and even events like the Horizon that we touched upon, helps translate the members' capability into market presence. And to me, I would say it converts that thought leadership into commercial relevance by connecting use cases, policy, signals, and sector demands. So I always tend to sort of conclude with this, so what? What does that mean, right? So WGIC is helping members move from being known within the geospatial sector to being relevant across the sectors that increasingly depends on geospatial. The greatest value here is strategy. It helps members move closer to where the market is going. And that becomes a gravitational pull that attracts members to WGIC.
Absolutely. Right. One of the aspects you briefly touched upon earlier in this conversation is about how fast the ecosystem and the technology is moving and how the governance systems are kind of trying to catch up. In that sense, how is WGIC influencing policies and regulatory frameworks for improved ease of doing business?
No, that's a good question there. That observation is true. WGIC influences policy, I would say, in quite a few ways. First, and that probably is an important one, through our neutrality, we are members and partners of several government agencies and think tanks. That gives the policymakers and institution access to a collective commercial perspective.
True.
This matters because policy is often shaped without the full understanding of how the market and the value chain in that market actually operates. Where the bottlenecks are, what a good enabling framework would look like. So we help in that influencing space. That's the first point. Second, WGIC helps raise the level of conversation. We're advocating for interoperability, standards, and responsible ecosystem, better policy around data, and how AI can support innovation while maintaining trust. So to me, WGIC's, if I can use the word job, is to help shape that environment to create and share, commercialize, and scale the geospatial value.
Fantastic. Commercialize and scale geospatial value. On that note, I want to end this conversation asking you what is that we can expect in 2026 under your leadership, under your stewardship from WGIC and its new initiatives?
Well, I've been thinking about this actually during my Christmas break, and I was having a chat with the executive team about this as well. So 2025, as we said, was a fantastic year, right? We introduced the Horizon platform. We had AWS as our first alliance member. So to me, 2026 is about sharpening and increasing the value proposition for our members. Horizon 2026 is going to be in London. It'll be clearly a big milestone. Horizon Plus dinners will expand as a more targeted format for senior business leaders in various adjacent industries. We also want to see our committees produce more visible outputs, whether that's policy insights, data themes, governance, and so forth, increase their value. One initiative that I'm particularly excited about is the idea of a WGIC-owned view of the industry. Think of it like a industry report. It's more grounded, and the direction it gives a direction of where the industry is going, built from the input of our members, because ultimately we are the domain experts. So we help through this report separate the hype from the reality. And there's a lot of hype out there, as I think you mentioned before. So I think the industry needs that, and WGIC can contribute to that. And so to summarize, in 2026, I want to see us turning the momentum into institutional capability and giving more value back to our members.
Fantastic. That's a nice, very powerful takeaway for the members, turning the momentum into institutional capability and more value for the members. Fantastic. Thank you so much for this conversation, Zubran. It was really lovely catching up with you and your insight and your forward-looking vision for the industry and for WGIC. Great talking to you.
Thank you, Banu. Thank you for having the time. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Great.
This has been Horizons by WGIC. Like, subscribe and share to help us spread insightful geospatial conversations.